My name is Jack Miller. If you're interested in paranormal events, missing places, or mysterious stories in America, you've probably heard my podcast, Midnight Files. For the past 7 years, I've been traveling across America investigating places where people say something unusual happens. Most of the cases turned out to be false. Sometimes they were stories made up by locals. Sometimes they were rumors on social media. And sometimes they were just people's imaginations. That's why I considered myself a realist. I didn't believe in ghosts. At least, until this incident. It all started in November 2024. I was in Briar Creek, a small town in Montana. This place is one of those places in America where there are only forests, mountains, and silence for miles. I went there to research a typical urban legend. But I had no idea that this trip would turn out to be the last normal trip of my life. It was about 7 in the evening. It was raining lightly. I was sitting in a local diner drinking coffee when an old man approached my table. He looked to be over 70 years old. He had deep wrinkles on his face and a strange anxiety in his eyes. "Are you Jack Miller?" he asked. "Yes." He slid an old piece of paper towards me. "If you really research strange things, go to this place." I picked up the paper. There were only 2 words written on it. Red Hollow Forest. "What's there?" I asked. The old man didn't answer right away. He looked around, as if he were afraid of someone. Then he spoke slowly. "That signal has returned." I couldn't understand anything. "What signal?" The old man's face went pale. "If you go there, turn on the radio at 3:17 a.m. Just remember this. The voice you hear, don't answer it." Saying this, he got up and left the diner. I watched him leave for a few moments. Then he laughed. I often met people like that in my work. Every town had some mysterious storyteller. But that night, something strange happened. I got back to my hotel, entered my room, and started setting up my recording equipment. Just then, an email arrived on my phone. The sender's name was not there. I had only written one line in the subject. 3:17 a.m. I was shocked. I opened the email. There was only one audio file inside. I played the file. At first, there was only noise. SHHHHHH. Then suddenly a woman's voice emerged. "Weak. Scared. If anyone is listening, for God's sake, don't come here." Then noise. "They're watching us. They're inside the forest. Please." The recording suddenly ended. A slight chill ran through my body. This didn't seem like an ordinary joke. I decided to go and see Red Hollow Forest the next day. The next morning the sky was cloudy. I packed my Jeep and headed for the forest. After about an hour's drive from town, I saw a rusty sign. Red Hollow Forest. The sign had almost fallen. Someone had written a sentence in red underneath it. "Don't answer the signal. Don't answer the signal." I entered the forest. As I continued, the mobile signal disappeared. After a few miles, there was complete silence. A silence that felt unusual. No birds. No animals. Not even the wind. Just silence. I stopped the car and started recording the surrounding video. That's when my eyes fell on an old object. A radio tower stood among the trees. Rusty, broken, and apparently unused for decades. I got closer. There was a plaque under the tower. It read, "Federal Communications Station 12. Closed 1998. 1998. This was the year that would change my life. I recorded the entire area and returned to the hotel by evening. Nothing unusual happened all day. But the real event was about to begin. The night was passing. I was deliberately staying awake. I had an old radio in front of me. 2:50 a.m. 3 a.m. 3:10 a.m. The silence in the room was growing. 3:16 a.m. The radio was off. I was looking at it. Then, for no reason, the radio turned on automatically. SHHHHHH. The noise spread throughout the room. My hand stopped. The radio needle started moving automatically, as if searching for an unknown frequency. Then suddenly the noise stopped. Silence. And then, a woman's voice was heard. The same voice that had been in the email. "Can anyone hear me?" My heart started beating faster. Please answer. I'm alone. They're getting closer. I sat silently. I remembered what the old man had said. The voice I heard. Don't answer it. The woman's voice began to cry. Answer for God's sake. I'm scared. Then suddenly, there was noise on the radio. And a new voice was heard. A man's voice. Very deep. Very inhuman. He hasn't answered yet. A thrill ran through my body. Because that voice was not coming from the radio. It was coming from inside my room. Right behind me. I turned slowly. And my breath stopped. Outside the window, at the height of the 3rd floor, a humanoid shadow was clinging. He was standing on the other side of the glass, watching me. And his eyes were brilliant white. Then he smiled and said softly. My breath caught in my chest. Outside the 3rd floor window, where it was impossible for a human to stand, there was a shadow. It was stuck to the glass. And it was looking straight at me. Its eyes were white. Just as white as the eyes of a dead person. For a few seconds, my body couldn't move. I just stared at it. Then suddenly, there was a noise on the radio. SHHHHHH. I turned to the radio in shock. Just for a moment. And when I looked back at the window, the thing had disappeared. My heart was beating so fast that I thought the whole room could hear it. I immediately went to the window. It was dark outside. I could see the hotel parking lot below. But there was no one there. No human being. Not a shadow. As if nothing had happened a few moments ago. I immediately closed the curtains. Then I tried to turn off the radio. But the radio wouldn't turn off. Even though I turned it off, the sound continued. Then the same woman spoke again. They've seen you. Go back now. There's still time. Then suddenly, there was a terrible scream. And the signal was cut off. The room was silent. I couldn't sleep all night. As soon as morning came, I decided that I had to get to the root of the matter. If this was some kind of joke, I had to find out. And if it wasn't a joke, then it was even more important to know the truth. The next morning I arrived at the Briar Creek Diner again. My eyes were searching for the same old man. He was sitting at a corner table, drinking coffee. I went straight to him. I need to talk to you. He looked at me and immediately knew something was up. You heard the signal. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Yes, I replied. And I saw something outside the window. His hands shook as he heard that. The coffee cup almost fell. You saw it? Who? The old man lowered his eyes. Walkers. I fell silent. What are walkers? He took a deep breath. Then he said, no one knew about them before 1998. But then one night, everything changed. His name was Walter Hayes. And he told me a story that the townspeople still tell in whispers to this day. In 1998, there was a government communications station operating inside the Red Hollow Forest. Federal Communications Station 12. The same station whose board I saw yesterday. 12 people worked at the station. Their job was to monitor signals in remote areas. Everything was going as usual. Then one night they received a strange frequency. A signal that was not coming from any known source. Every night at 3:17. At exactly the same time. At first everyone thought it was a technical glitch. Then they started recording. And that's when the problem started. People were talking in the signal. People that no one knew. Sometimes women. Sometimes men. Sometimes children. They all said the same thing. Find us. After a few weeks, the station employees began to behave strangely. They would go into the forest at night, talking to themselves, and claiming that someone was calling them. Then, one night, all 12 employees disappeared. In one night, without a trace. Only one thing was found. One last recording. Walter took out an old USB from his pocket. This is a copy of this recording. I immediately plugged it into my laptop. Played the file. At first there was only noise. Then a man started shouting. They're outside. Close the doors. Several people were running in the background, frightened by something. Then there was the sound of a gunshot. And then, a strange sound. A sound I'd never heard before. Not human. Not animal. A few seconds later, a man shouted. They don't have faces. Then the recording ended. A chill ran through my body. After that, I asked. Walter answered. No one came back after that. And the walkers? They were seen for the first time since that night. I fell silent. Suddenly, my eyes fell on the window of the diner. A man was standing outside, in black clothes, completely still. I stared at him for a few seconds. Then a thrill ran through my body, because he had no face, just smooth white skin. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. I stood up immediately. Walter. I pointed to the window, but when Walter looked, the place was empty. There was nothing. Walter's face turned pale. They've seen you. Now they'll chase you. At that moment, a notification came on my phone. Unknown number. Just one picture. I opened the picture. It was a picture of me. I was sitting in my hotel room last night. The picture was taken from outside the window, from the height of the 3rd floor. And under the picture, there was just one sentence. Come to the forest tonight at 3:17. Otherwise, we will come to you ourselves. My hands started shaking. There was a picture of myself on the phone screen. A picture that someone had taken from outside a 3rd floor hotel window. A place where no human could possibly stand. Beneath the picture was written, come to the jungle tonight at 3:17. Or we'll come to you ourselves. I stared at the screen for several moments. Then I slowly put the phone down on the table. Walter's face turned pale when he saw the picture. That didn't go well. Why? I asked. He took a last sip of his coffee before answering. Because no one had been invited before. Invitation? Yes. They were always looking for people. But you're the first person they've ever called. A chill ran through my body. What if I don't go? Walter fell silent. Then he said softly, then maybe you'll end up like those 12. I had been lost in that thought all day. I returned to the hotel. I prepared my recording equipment. Camera, flashlight, audio recorder, extra batteries, and a pistol that I kept with me in case of emergencies. I didn't know what I was going to find, but one thing was clear. If the answers were out there somewhere, they were inside Red Hollow Forest. The night was slowly getting darker. 11 p.m., 12 a.m., 1 a.m. At 2:15 a.m., I set off for the forest. The road was deserted. The sky was overcast. The moon wasn't even visible. When I reached the entrance to the forest, the clock showed 2:48. I stopped the car, turned off the engine, and got out. The forest was unusually quiet, so quiet that I could hear my own heartbeat. I turned on the camera and started recording. I'm Jack Miller. The time is 2:50 a.m. I'm inside Red Hollow Forest. I slowly started walking through the trees. The light from the flashlight didn't reach more than a few feet. 15 minutes passed. Nothing happened. Then suddenly, my radio started making noise. SHHHHHH. I stopped. The radio was off. Still the sound was coming. The noise got louder. And then I heard a woman's voice. Jack. I froze. He called my name. Jack. Don't look back. My hands started shaking. They're standing behind you. My breath caught. Every human being has a nature. Whatever is forbidden, the heart wants to see that. I tried my best to stop myself. But finally, I turned around, and my soul, as it were, left my body. Dozens of shadows stood among the trees, absolutely silent, without moving. They were human-like, but they didn't have faces. Just white, smooth skin. They were all looking at me, or maybe feeling. I took a step back, and at that moment all the shadows started moving towards me at once. I immediately ran. Branches were hitting my face. The ground was slipping, but I wasn't ready to stop. There were footsteps behind me. Dozens of footsteps. I ran as hard as I could. Then, suddenly, a light appeared in front of me. I stopped. There was an open space between the trees, and in the middle of it stood an old watchtower, rusty, broken, and apparently abandoned for many years. I immediately ran towards it. The door to the tower was half open. I went inside. As soon as I closed the door, all the sounds outside stopped. Silence. A silence that would hurt your ears. I tried to catch my breath. Then my eyes fell on the wall. There was something written on the wall in red. In big letters. Don't trust the voices. Don't trust the voices. Beneath it was another sentence. They can copy anyone. They can copy anyone's voice. A thrill ran through my body. A woman's voice. The one that came on the radio. Was that also a lie? Then a voice came from above. Knock, knock, knock. Like someone walking on the top floor of a tower. I turned the flashlight up. The stairs were lost in the darkness. But someone was there. I was sure. Then I heard a familiar voice. Jack. My heart stopped. It was Walter's voice. Jack, come up. I found him, but the sentence written on the wall was still in front of me. They can copy anyone. Sweat broke out on my forehead. If Walter was up there, then everything was fine. But if Walter wasn't up there, then what was waiting for me there? At that moment, a terrifying scream was heard from the top of the tower. And then, the sound of something heavy being dragged began. Slowly, the sound was coming down the stairs. And now, it was coming towards me. The sound of dragging on the stairs kept getting closer. Grunting, grunting, like something heavy was being dragged up the iron stairs. I was standing at the bottom of the tower, flashlight in hand and heart pounding. Jack. Walter's voice came from above again. Come up quickly. We don't have much time. The phrase written on the wall began to echo in my mind. They can copy anyone. I decided to check the bottom first instead of going up. The floor of the tower was covered in a thick layer of dust. But one thing was strange. There were fresh footprints near the stairs. And they weren't going up. They were coming down from above. That is, something was up there just a little while ago. Then suddenly, the sound of something falling from above came. Bang! The entire tower shook. I jumped back in shock. Then there was complete silence. A few seconds later, another voice was heard. But not Walter's this time. It was a woman's voice. Very weak. Very scared. Can anyone hear me? A thrill ran through my body. It was the same voice. The same woman who had been asking for help on the radio. Please, get me out of here. The voice was coming from the top of the tower. I stood still for a few moments. Then I slowly started climbing the stairs. The rusty iron stairs creaked with every step. Chirr, chirr. My flashlight was piercing the darkness as I climbed. As I reached the top, the air was getting colder. Unseasonably cold. Colder than a November night in Montana. Finally, I reached the top floor of the tower. It was a small room. Broken appliances, rusty radios, and strange markings on the walls. But there was no one there. Not Walter. Not the woman. The room was empty. A chill ran down my spine. Then my flashlight fell on a table. On it lay an old diary. The diary was covered in dust. And on its cover was a name. Emily Carter. I was shocked. It was the same name I had found in the metadata of the first recording. The woman whose voice was heard in the signal. I immediately opened the diary. The first pages consisted of general notes. But then the writing began to change. The writing became random. Sentences began to be incomplete. And on each page the same thing was written over and over again. They are not people. They are not people. They are not people. They are not human beings. My hands began to tremble. I began to turn the next page. There was a date written there. October 17th, 1998. This was the same year that the 12 employees of the communication station disappeared. I began to read. The signal is getting stronger every night now. We thought it was coming from space. We were wrong. It's coming from under the ground. I stopped. Under the ground? I continued reading. Last night we found the source. There is a tunnel under the forest, and inside the tunnel. The sentence ended here. The ink had spread across the paper, as if the writer's hand had suddenly moved. Then, on the next page, there was only one sentence. Don't let them open the door. Don't let them open the door. At that moment, someone behind me breathed softly. I froze. There was no one in the room except me. Or, at least, that's what I thought. The breathing was heard again. this time right next to my ear. I turned around immediately, and I screamed. In the corner of the room stood a humanoid being. Its body was human-like, but its face was completely flat. No eyes, no nose, no mouth, only white skin. He wasn't moving. He was just standing there and looking at me. Or maybe he was feeling it. My hand immediately grabbed the pistol. I took aim and fired. Bang! The bullet hit him straight in the chest. But nothing happened. He didn't even move. As if the bullet hadn't touched him. A new wave of fear ran through my body. Then something moved on his face. The smooth skin began to flutter, like wax melting. And a few seconds later, eyes began to form on his face. Then a nose, then a mouth. And finally, the face was complete. What I saw shook the ground beneath my feet, because that face was mine, exactly like me. The same eyes, the same hair, the same form. My other form stood before me. Then he smiled and spoke for the first time. You've finally arrived, Jack. The door is about to open now. At that moment, the entire tower began to shake violently. A terrible explosion-like sound came from deep within the earth below. And in the silence of the forest, hundreds of voices echoed together. Open the door. Open the door. Open the door. I ran to the window, and the scene I saw outside. It made my blood run cold. Around the watchtower, hundreds of faceless beings had gathered, and all eyes were on me above. Hundreds of faceless beings stood around the watchtower. I was looking out the window. As far as I could see, white faces shone through the trees, silent, motionless, but their presence was enough. It seemed as if the entire forest had come to life. The being standing before me, who had taken on my form, was still smiling. What are you? I asked in a trembling voice. He didn't answer. He just tilted his head to one side and looked at me. Then he said softly, We are those who live on the other side, and you are the door we have been waiting for. At that moment, the entire tower began to shake again. A faint echo could be heard from the ground below, as if something very large was moving underground. I waited no longer. I picked up the flashlight, grabbed the diary, and ran for the stairs. When I got down, surprisingly, all the faceless beings had disappeared. The entire forest was silent again, but the silence now felt more eerie than ever. I immediately got to the car and returned to the hotel. I read Emily Carter's diary several times until morning. With each page, a new truth was revealed. In 1998, it was not just the employees of the communications station who disappeared. There was another incident, an incident that the local authorities have forever covered up. Camp Hollow Creek, a summer camp deep in the forest. In June 1998, there were 34 people there. Children, counselors, staff. And one night, all 34 people disappeared. No bodies were found. No clues were found. Just empty tents. And a strange radio recording. In the last pages of the diary, Emily had written, The campers saw the door. They tried to open it. That was their fault. I immediately began searching the internet. The official records were almost non-existent. But after hours of searching, I found an old newspaper. There was a blurry photo in the newspaper. The last photo of Camp Hollow Creek. I began to look at the photo carefully. At first, everything seemed normal. The children were sitting around the campfire. The counselors were laughing. But then my eyes fell on the back of the photo. A shadow stood among the trees, much taller than the rest. And its face wasn't there. My heart stopped beating. It was the same thing. The same being I had seen in the woods. He was there in 1998 too. Just then my phone rang. Walter was calling. I answered immediately. Jack, where are you? His voice was nervous. At the hotel. There was a moment of silence. Then he said softly, No, you're not alone. A shiver ran down my spine. What do you mean? Look in the mirror in your room. The phone almost fell from my hand. I slowly turned to the mirror in the room. At first I couldn't see anything. Then I saw myself. And someone behind me. A long shadow. standing still, right behind me. I turned around immediately. The room was empty, but when I looked in the mirror again, the shadow was still there, and it was slowly approaching me. I backed away in fear. At that moment, waves began to form in the mirror's surface, as if it were not glass, but water. Then a scene appeared in it, an underground tunnel.
Long, dark.
And at the end of the tunnel, a huge iron door. There were strange markings on the door, the same markings as on the walls of the watchtower. And in front of the door, dozens of people were standing. Missing people, campers from 1998, employees of the communication station. They were all there, but they didn't seem alive. Their faces were blank, as if their identities had been taken away. Then they all looked at me at once and said the same sentence, "Don't open the door." The next moment, the mirror cracked with a loud bang.
Bang.
Glass shards scattered all over the room. I fell to the ground. And at that moment, Walter shouted on the phone,
"Jack.
They've found the tunnel. They'll try to open the door tonight." "Where's the tunnel?" I shouted. Walter answered after a few seconds of silence. "Under Red Hollow Forest, and I know where the path is." At that moment, the call was disconnected. The screen went black, and only a new message appeared on the phone. "The entrance has been opened. Tonight at 3:17, the last door will open." That night, for the first time, I seriously thought that maybe I should just leave everything and leave. I could have gotten in the car. I could have left Montana and never come back. But there was one problem. Those things had already found me. They had reached my hotel, to my phone, to my dreams. And now I was convinced that if I had tried to run, they would probably have gone with me. At 11 p.m., I met Walter again. This time, he looked more worried than ever. There were dark circles under his eyes, and he looked as if he hadn't slept in days. "Time is running out," he said as he got into the car. "If we don't do something tonight, it's all over." "What is this door?" I asked. Walter fell silent. Then he spoke slowly. "I don't know the whole truth, but my grandfather worked at Station 12. He was one of the few people who were on the first investigation team." I looked at him immediately, and according to him, that door wasn't built. "What do you mean?" Walter took a cold breath. "It was already there." A thrill ran through my body. Under the ground. Maybe for centuries. Maybe even longer. We kept going deeper into the forest. Finally, at about 2:20 a.m., we reached a place where the trees stood in an unusual circle. The ground was sunken in the middle, and there was an old iron lid. Walter shone his flashlight on it. It looked like the entrance to an old bunker or maintenance tunnel. "This is it," he said slowly. We lifted the lid. Rusty stairs led down into the darkness, and a strange cold air rose from below. An air that wasn't dusty or damp, but of some old, closed place. We both began to descend. The stairs went down about 50 feet. Then a tunnel began.
Long,
narrow, and unusually quiet. The walls were covered with the same strange markings I had seen before, like words in an unknown language. We walked for about 10 minutes. Then the tunnel suddenly opened into a vast hall, and I stopped there, because there was that thing in front of me.
The door.
It really was there, at least 25 feet high, made of black metal. There were thousands of strange carvings on its surface, and in the middle was a circle, inside which 3 symbols were shining, with a faint red light. Fear involuntarily rose in my body. Seeing this door, it felt as if my mind itself did not want to accept it, as if this thing was not of this world. Then I heard Walter's voice. "Look here." I turned the flashlight to the other side, and my blood froze. Dozens of old skeletons were lying against the wall. Some were human, and some, I couldn't say for sure if they were human or not. Their bones were unusually shaped,
long,
twisted, and strangely connected. "What is all this?" I whispered. Walter didn't answer, because he was looking at something else. I followed his gaze, and my breath stopped. A man stood in front of the door, in black clothes, completely silent. Then another, and then dozens. Faceless beings began to gather silently around the door. They did not make a sound of walking, nor breathed. They just kept appearing, as if the darkness was giving birth to them. Suddenly, they all raised their heads together and looked at the door. Then they repeated the same sentence. "The time has come. The time has come. The time has come." Their voices began to echo together. The entire hall began to shake. The red sign on the door became brighter than before. I looked at the clock. 3:14 a.m. Only 3 minutes remained. Then suddenly, there was a knock on the other side of the door. Knock. I froze. Then again. Knock. This time louder. And then, dozens of knocks, as if hundreds of hands were pounding on the door from the other side. Knock. 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 All the faceless beings in the hall fell to their knees, as if waiting for a king to arrive. Walter's face turned white with fear. Oh God.
He's awake.
Before I could ask anything, the circle in the middle of the door slowly began to open. And from inside, a huge eye appeared, many times larger than a human eye, looking straight at me. And at that moment, a voice echoed in my head. "Jack Miller, you're finally back." My heart skipped a beat. Back. I'd never set foot here before. Then how did this thing know me? The pupil of my eye twitched slowly. And he said again, "This time the door will open completely, and you won't be able to stop us." At that moment, the clock read 3:17 a.m., and the entire door began to shake. As the clock read 3:17 a.m., the entire hall began to shake. All the markings on the surface of the door began to glow with red light. The ground was shaking. Dirt and rocks were falling from the tunnel ceiling. And that giant eye in the middle of the door kept staring at me. "Jack Miller, you're late." His voice was echoing not in my ears, but directly in my mind. My head began to ache violently. I fell to my knees. At that moment, strange scenes began to appear before me. Scenes that were not from my life, but somehow they still felt like mine. I saw a woman, Emily Carter, the same woman whose voice I had heard on the signal. She was running inside the tunnel.
Scared.
Injured. Several faceless beings were walking behind him. Then the scene changed. I saw the lost camp of 1998. All the children were standing in a circle, and a black door was slowly opening in the middle of the forest. Then the scene changed again. Now I saw a little boy, maybe 10 years old. He was standing at the edge of the forest, and the amazing thing was, that boy was me. My breath caught. "This is impossible," I whispered. I had grown up in Chicago my whole life. I had never been to Montana. At least, that's what I remembered. Then another memory emerged. A memory that had never existed in my mind. I saw myself as a child, in the forest, at night, and there was a man with me. It was my father. I opened my eyes in surprise. My father had died when I was only 12. He had never even mentioned Red Hollow Forest. But the memory was clear. We were standing in front of this tunnel, in front of this door. Then my father looked at me
And said,
"If it wakes up again, only you can stop it." The next moment, the memory disappeared. I was back in the tunnel. I was out of breath. Walter was shaking me. Jack, come to your senses." I raised my head with difficulty. The door had opened wider than before. It was completely dark inside. But that darkness was not empty. Something was moving inside it. Very big. So big that only a part of it was visible. And then I realized that I wasn't the eye of any creature. It was just a small part of its body. The real thing was much grander and more terrifying. Suddenly, all the faceless beings stood together and started to stretch their arms in the same direction,
towards the door.
Then their bodies began to change. Their white skin began to crack, and black smoke began to come out of them. A few seconds later, they all began to dissolve, as if their true form had changed. Their smoke began to move towards the door, and the door began to open wider. Walter's face turned white with fear. "They're giving it power. If it opens completely, everything will be over." I looked around. A strange symbol was carved on the floor of the tunnel. The same symbol I had seen in my childhood vision. At that moment, Another memory flashed through my mind. My father's voice. The door is easy to open. It's hard to close. But if the time comes, the key will always be near the door. The key? I immediately scanned the floor. Then my eyes fell on a metal object, buried in the dirt. I picked it up. It was an old metal locket, and it had my name engraved on it. Jack. My hands began to tremble. I had this locket when I was a child, but it had been lost years ago. How did it get here? Only then did the eye look at me again, and for the first time, there was anger in his voice. No, you shouldn't have found this. Then the entire door shook violently, and a huge hand began to reach out from the darkness inside. An inhuman hand. Its long fingers were touching the walls of the tunnel. He was actually entering our world. Walter stepped back.
Jack. Now.
Or it will be too late. I gripped the pendant tightly, and at that moment, a blue light burst from within it. All the markings on the walls of the tunnel began to glow. The creature inside the door let out a terrifying scream for the first time. A scream that was not made for human ears. Then the ground shook again violently, and a crack appeared above the door. Maybe, just maybe, there really was a way to close it. But the next moment, Walter suddenly screamed. I turned around, and my blood froze, because a faceless being stood behind Walter, and his hands were buried inside Walter's chest. Walter's eyes were filled with fear.
He looked at me one last time
And said only one sentence. Close the door. Then he was pulled into the darkness, and the tunnel echoed with his scream. The locket was in my hand, the door opening in front of me, and the thing on the other side, which was finally about to be free. Walter had disappeared into the darkness. His screams were still echoing off the tunnel walls. I was left alone. I had the locket in my hand, and in front of me was the door, which was opening wider with each passing moment. The giant creature on the other side had now fully extended its hand. Its fingers were crawling along the tunnel walls. Wherever it touched, the stones would turn to black ash. I knew, if this thing fully entered our world, not just Red Hollow Forest, perhaps the entire world would be in danger. At that moment, the locket began to heat up in my hand. The blue light emanating from it was getting brighter. Then suddenly, the last memory flashed through my mind. I was a child again, about 10 years old. My father was standing in front of me, but now for the first time I could see fear on their faces. If the door ever opens again, they said, then remember, the key won't be enough to close the door. I asked, then what will have to be done? My father fell silent, and then he said softly, someone has to get to the other side. A cold wave ran through my body. The memory vanished. I was back in the tunnel, and now I understood everything. That's why my name had been chosen. That's why the locket had come to me. That's why the creature was calling me, the one who has returned. My father had once been part of the secret too, and now, this responsibility was mine. The eye inside the door turned to me again. You won't do that. You want to live. All humans want to live. I remained silent, but the truth was I was scared too, terribly scared. I didn't want to die. I wanted to go back to my life, to my podcast, to my friends, to my normal world. But sometimes, the right decision isn't the easy one. It's the necessary one. I slowly started to walk towards the door. The creature's scream echoed throughout the tunnel. Stop. You don't know what's on the other side. Maybe she was telling the truth. But it was too late now. I got closer to the door. The pendant was brighter than ever. All the signs on the tunnel walls were glowing with blue light. Then I saw something else. Inside the door, in the darkness, dozens of faces. No, hundreds. The missing people of 1998. The camp children. The communication station employees. Emily Carter. And Walter. They were all watching me. Then Emily said softly, now. I placed the locket on the mark in the center of the door. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, a huge blast of blue light. The tunnel shook. The creature screamed so hard that my ears started to bleed. Its giant hand began to pull back. The door began to close. slowly. But there was a problem. I was also being pulled toward the door by that light. I remembered my father's words. Someone has to get to the other side. Now I knew what it cost to close the door completely. I looked back one last time. Then close your eyes and surrendered to the light. Everything went white. Then nothing. 3 months later, Briars Creek, Montana. Red Hollow Forest was silent again. No signal was coming in. No mysterious broadcasts. No faceless beings were seen. People gradually forgot about the incident. But one thing remained. One last audio file. This file was received by a local radio station. Time, 3:17 a.m. The file was only 27 seconds long. There was a lot of noise in the recording. Then a familiar voice was heard. It was my voice, Jack Miller's. I was saying softly, "If you're hearing this, the door is closed. For now." There was a few seconds of silence. Then my voice was heard again. But now she was scared. Very scared. But on the other hand, I'm not alone. Then there was a whisper of something in the background. A voice that wasn't human. And then the recording abruptly ended. The end. Or maybe just the beginning.